What's going on, guys? Welcome in to kick off the tip-off. Coming at you again with another mock draft for a mock draft Monday here. Bringing Brady back on. We're going to flip-flop the picks this time. I'm going to go odds, and Brady's going to go even. So a little bit of a different aspect and some different teams that we'll be looking at. And Brady, man, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. I'm not going to spend too much time on the chalk. We know Cam Ward is going number one. I believe your favorite player, one of your favorite players in this draft, will be going number two to the Browns.
Just gonna go Travis Hunter here. It's the pick that I realistically should go one, but I understand the need for a QB. I'm just gonna not overthink it and go Travis Hunter at two.
Yeah, I just think I wonder, like, looking back on this, if Cam Ward ends up not being I don't even want to say extremely good, like good enough to at least compete in that division. If Mike Bergonzi, the GM, is looks back on this and says, why did we pass on Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter for a quarterback in a bad quarterback class? So that'd be something to look at later on down the line. But pick three here, New York Giants, kind of the unfortunate situation. Travis Hunter, a way better fit for them in terms of players and just needs. Him with Wanda Robinson, Malik Neighbors would be a really good trio of receivers. And then him and Deontay Banks would be pretty fun to watch in the secondary. But they still end up with a generational edge prospect in Abdul Carter to pair with Brian Burns. And, we'll see what they end up doing with Thibodeau. I would imagine Carter kind of, cuts into his time a little bit. But I think they find a way to make it work with all those guys. So I think the draft really officially starts here at 4, Brady, with the New England Patriots.
Yeah, and I just but you know I just don't see how you can go anywhere but Will Campbell here. You've got your franchise quarterback. I'm a big Drake May believer, big fan. I know they need wide receiver. They missed on Polk last year. I just don't love Ted enough to take him here at 4. And I think Will Campbell would fill a big need for you at offensive line and protect your franchise. So I think
Yeah,
that's
absolutely agree. I just think
a reasonable pick.
it's when the only looming kind of downside of a prospect is arm length, and you just see the SEC tape that he puts on, and against obviously some guys who are going to go in the first round of this draft, Shamar Stewart, and a couple other guys. So I agree. You get your franchise left tackle. If he ends up not being a tackle, you're still getting an all-pro guard, like Quentin Nelson level guard. So I just think it's a no-brainer pick for a team that desperately needs the left tackle. So at pick 5 here, Brady, let's just shake things up just for the sake of it, because every time I feel like we do this, it's Mason Graham, pick 5, to the Jags. And I'll actually justify Tetairoa McMillan going here. I think this guy is a prime example of prospect fatigue right now. It's just, you and I are huge fans of Emeka Ibuka, obviously. Ibuka, unlikely to probably crack the top 12, but Tetairoa McMillan, a true X receiver potential guy. I think him and Brian Thomas Jr. would be extremely fun to watch. I think this is a pick that maybe Liam Cohen can sell to Gladstone, their new GM. He kind of gets his Mike Evans clone to come over, and really no more excuses for Trevor Lawrence, man. New offense with Cohen, I guess, but it's a extremely weak division. You look at Anthony Richardson, your boy there, hasn't necessarily had the success that Colts were hoping for. C.J. Stroud kind of took a sophomore slump a little regression, and then you're going to be looking at a rookie quarterback with Cam Ward and the Titans. So I think, Tetairoa and McMillan can be justified, and I'm going to pass on Mason Graham in this one.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I'm going to do a little bit different than what we would typically do. I know Genty's the big pick here, and I'm a huge Genty believer. I just want to switch it up a little bit. I think in this scenario, the Raiders have shown that they just go best player available. I mean, you saw it the Brock Bowers pick last year. They didn't reach it at QB. They've got Geno now. They just signed him. I think you go here, you solidify that defense even more. You pair him with Max Crosby, Tyree Wilson, Christian Wilkins. You get Mason Graham here to really shore up that front 7, front 4, really. Mm-hmm. And I like the fit there a lot. And I think he's starting to get a little bit of a fatigue as well, some prospect fatigue.
Yeah, a lot of these guys, building up to the draft, just because when you're talking about it so much, it could just get boring and really chalky. So kind of we really just kind of flip flop picks there at 5-6, and obviously Genty in the mix there with the Raiders. But I've been saying this, and I think the thing to remember here with the Raiders and what's interesting is they have the ability to pass on Genty there at the 6th spot, because I think in that early second round, or if they trade up maybe early in the second round, they have a chance to get Travion Henderson. Judkins, like obviously a phenomenal running back class, and Chip Kelly, I'm sure would love to get either Henderson or Judkins to kind of pair in that offense that they already ran at Ohio State.
Yeah.
So pick 7 here with the Jets. The kind of noise of Breece Hall trade rumors, I'm not necessarily buying into that. I'm not sure what Aaron Glenn was thinking, saying trio. Running back trio of Davis, Breece Hall, and who's the other one I'm missing? Brady?
Braylon Allen.
Yeah, Braylon Allen, Wisconsin, so I knew I was missing a noticeable one. But I'm going to go Armand Mimbu here, Brady. Really good combine riser, guy who solidified himself as, in my opinion, no farther than 14 to the Colts. I don't think he gets past. And Yep. They have a pretty desperate need there at right tackle after Morgan Moses goes to the Patriots. You get Olu Fashanu left tackle, Armand Mimbu at right tackle, and let Justin Fields grow and develop in 2 years and see what you got.
Yeah, I like that fit. Here with the Panthers, I know we're drafting based off what we would do, so I would love to go Emeka Egbuka here. Like you said earlier, though, I don't think he quite cracks the top 12. Maybe there for Dallas. He definitely isn't going here at 8. But I'm going to go somebody, that I'm just going to stick with what you went last time. From everything I've seen, I keep up heavily with the Panthers Twitter. Jalen Walker, if he's there at 8, he's the pick. There's no debate about it at this point. Canales likes him. Dan Morgan likes him. He likes Carolina. So I think he's basically a lock here at 8, really.
Yeah, I mean, the tape is pretty unbelievable when you watch him, and like I just said in the last video I did, outside of Travis Hunter at corner and then Abdul Carter, in my opinion, I think Walker is the third best defensive prospect in this class. It just so happens that the Raiders would more so need have a draft need on defensive line, and then if the Jags were to go on the defensive side of the ball with Mason Graham, Jalen Walker and Trayvon Walker, or is Trayvon Walker, Brady? Yeah, I don't. Jalen Walker, Trayvon Walker, kind of similar roles off the edge there. So would imagine they're not double dipping in that category. So yeah. I'm all in on Jalen Walker. I think he's unbelievable and one of my favorite players in this draft. May actually be my favorite player in this draft. I'll probably go on record saying that. So pick 9 with the Saints. I'm going Shedeur Sanders, especially with the Derek Carr news. The crazy part to me about this is like we have not heard anything from Kellen Moore and like Saints in general, which is a good thing. I mean, not often do you not hear a lot of draft buzz from a team, and maybe nobody knows what they're going to do. And I kind of talked about it. They're in a unique situation where they may be able to stick and pick at 9 and take a franchise quarterback to kind of kickstart the Kellen Moore era. Obviously work with Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, and Herbert, and now gets a pretty good quarterback in year 1 to build with the New Orleans Saints and Shedeur Sanders, in my opinion.
I'm not the biggest Shedeur fan. I've heard a comp here recently that I'm a big fan of. I think Mac Jones might be the perfect Shedeur comp. And if he reaches his ceiling's like a Jared Goff. So for me personally, I wouldn't take him this high, but I understand why the Saints would, and I don't completely hate it. He is super accurate. So, I mean, that's one very, very big positive.
Well, I don't completely hate it. That was my comp, man. I think I've been saying, I think he's a taller, more lean Bryce Young. I think like when I watch Bryce Young and then when I watch Colorado games with Shedeur, like they kind of move the same, little similarities in the throwing style. Like I actually like the comp of Bryce Young, and like I said, when I say that to people, they're like, "Oh, so you think he's dog shit?" And I'm like, "No, I'm like, you don't watch Panther games."
Yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree with that comp to a certain extent. I can see some of it with the accuracy. I just think the pocket presence is a massive difference. Shedeur gives off the Mac Jones, the biggest one. even though he's a good QB, he gives off Baker Mayfield pocket presence vibes. Everybody loves Baker Mayfield. I'm a Baker Mayfield guy, but his pocket presence is severely lacking.
Yeah, it can be
He's
sus at
made it
times.
work. He's made it work, so it's possible for Shadur. But I think Bryce has pretty good pocket presence. But other than that, I could see the comp. I don't completely hate it.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
just quarterback influx in general. You're, probably, especially like I said, with the Derek Carr injury, they're kind of. I have a hard time imagining they're going to roll out Rattler again for another year if Carr's done for this season. So I think you take your swing there at pick 9 because, like, and I'll let you get on with your pick. Would they pass on Ashton Genty here? Maybe that's a pick. Like, I don't know, man.
it's a QB tax, man. I understand it.
Yeah.
I could very easily see him going to 9. But here at 10, I'm not passing on Genty again. I think Ben Johnson would run to the podium himself if Genty was still here at 10. We've seen what he likes to do with the 2 running back system. I'm not a Swift believer at all. I really dislike DeAndre Swift a lot. But if he's your complimentary guy behind Genty, who I think is a generational running back prospect, I think you're in a pretty good position. So I'm not that upset with Swift being the 2. So yeah, I'll do Genty here for the Bears.
And how beautiful is it that the Bears, the way that they address the offensive line in free agency and trade with Jonah Jackson, like you don't have to spend that pick on a Kelvin Banks or a Josh Simmons or some sort of tackle or at that point they would maybe kick one of either Banks to guard or Tevin Jenkins, I believe, or Braxton Jones, maybe I think is their left tackle, somebody in the guard, but you have the luxury of taking Ashton Genty at 10 because of the way you address the offensive line. So absolutely sprinting up to the top of the podium and picking Ashton Genty. So pick 11 here, San Francisco 49ers, Brady. Going to get the Charchavius Ward replacement. Will Johnson, my favorite cornerback in this class. And actually, Brady, the more that I'm watching some of this cornerback class, I think there's a fairly decent gap between Will Johnson and Jahdae Barron. The more I watch Jahdae Barron, the more I'm getting a little bit not hesitant. I still think he's a first round talent, but where I think Jahdae Barron is more so of a kind of technical corner in terms of like playing zone, being able to go step for step with receivers. I think Will Johnson can get it done with just pure athleticism. Like, I don't know where I'm going with that, but like I hope you see what I'm saying. I think he reminds me a lot of Sauce Gardner, where maybe he's not as his technique is not as perfect as some of these other cornerbacks in this class, but he gets away with it because of how lengthy he is and just the plays that he can make off pure athleticism. I guess that's the best way I'm trying to put it.
Yeah, I like his athleticism, but I think really the big Sauce comparison you'll see is the physicality from corner. Mm-hmm. I think that's really what he's got. And I'm a big Will Johnson fan, and like you said, I think there's a decent gap between him and Barron. Although I do see Barron as more of a slot guy, and he's kind of a gambler there in the slot. So that just naturally isn't valued as drastically as an outside corner. Here with the Cowboys, though, I think there's a number of ways you can go. There's, who I want to take, but I'm going to do kind of what I did earlier. I'm going to stick to the same position. I think he's a match made in heaven for them just because of a few things. I'm going to go Matthew Golden here for the Cowboys. I think he's been a big riser in terms of wide receivers, and I'm a big Golden fan as well. I like the Egbuka pick here as also, but I just think Egbuka and CD, granted they're different, but they do similar things. Well, I think Golden comes in and he's kind of your field stretcher, which is kind of what they're lacking. CD can handle all the middle of the field and short stuff, while Golden, he can do it all as well, but he's got that long speed, ran the fastest 40 this year at the combine for wide receivers. You keep him in Texas, and he's had a few little Twitter arguments I've seen here lately, and that's just perfect for a Cowboys player. So I think he's nearly a lock to go here almost. So
yeah, definitely. I like the way you point that out, Mecca Ibuka, and where you and I think in our agreement in terms of like rankings, we would have him higher than Golden, but in terms of scheme and just kind of what the Cowboys would need on the opposite side of CeeDee Lamb, I do like the Golden pairing a lot more than I like Ibuka. So yeah, man, obviously like that. I would actually, Brady, before I make a very obvious pick for the Dolphins, I want to mention something. I think something to watch here would be the Cowboys moving up maybe with Yeah, I could see your Panthers potentially trading down 4 picks there if they wanted to jump up into the top 10. Who knows, Brady? It's Jerry Jones at the end of the day. I know they got Javante Williams and another running back, but, I could see Jerry Jones doing something crazy and getting in the
Yeah,
top 10 to take Genty just because, and I could just see that happening. But back to my
yeah,
pick here at 13. Pretty easy, Brady. I'm getting your Armstead replacement. I'm going Kelvin Banks Jr., plug and play left tackle. Not really much to be said. Will Campbell, obviously the most talented offensive lineman in this draft, I think, but Banks is right there, set in stone at number 2, in my opinion. Whereas I think Mimbu is more of a true right tackle prospect, and it kind of fits the need for the Jets more, where Olu Fashanu can play left tackle. I think Banks just plug and play his natural position where he played at Texas. This is just kind of a match made in heaven at 13.
yeah. I like that. And I know last time we did this, we discussed Armstead's future. You never know, and he's officially retired at this point. So that's a big need. Now you know exactly what you got to go out and get. And if Kelvin Banks is there, I think you're pretty happy with that selection.
Back to back hook 'em horns.
Yeah, and I think if you're here with the Colts and you see Kelvin Banks and Membo both off the board, you're a little bit upset, honestly. Um, so I'm actually going to do something I've kind of just talked myself into it. Actually, I'm going to go Malachi Starks here.
Okay.
Um, they have a big need at safety. They've lost Julian Blackman this offseason. You still have Nick Cross at safety, who I don't love, but I don't hate. I think he's fine. But I think Malachi Starks, he's even more so than Tet and Mason Graham, like we said earlier. I think Malachi Starks might have had the most prospect fatigue of anybody in this cycle. I think he's the safety one by a pretty wide margin. I think a lot of these other safeties are pretty good athletes and they have some good tape. And I like me and you both like a couple of them, but I think Starks is just the safety one. And I think he'd fill in a big need back here at safety for the Colts, where they desperately need some help in the secondary. They've been lacking for quite a few years now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how high, especially Starks goes. I think last mock we did, we had 3 safeties going in the first round, and it always said safety's kind of the running back side of the ball in defense. They tend to not necessarily get paid, and it's kind of a spot where guys' contracts up, you're letting it walk, and they think it's easy to replace. But dynamic safeties are pretty hard to come by. I think Malachi Starks can be that. I do like that pairing there in Indianapolis, so good pick there for sure. And then pick 15, Brady, obviously have mocked time and time again Jahad Campbell here to the Falcons. But I'm actually going to go Jahdae Barron here to pair up with A.J. Terrell. I think that would be pretty good combo to watch there for a team that needs some help in the cornerback room.
Yeah, I like that. I like that fit a lot. Like I said, he's kind of more of your like slot nickel corner.
Mm-hmm.
AJ's more of your outside corner, so they could be on the field together a lot of times. They had a pretty, in terms of names, they had Simmons, Bates, Terrell. They had a pretty good secondary just based off that alone, but they actually underperformed this year. But I think getting in Barron like that would be a huge help for them. Here with the Cardinals, though, I know the popular selection here for the Cardinals is a lot of people like to go defensive line with them, but I feel like they've spent so much for the defensive line. They brought in Josh Sweat this offseason. They brought back Calais Campbell, who he might be 65 years old, but he was honestly the best player on Miami's defense last year.
Yeah.
Year in and year out, he just comes in and he is still a great football player. I don't know how, but he does it. They brought in Dalvin Tomlinson. You brought in Akeem Davis-Gaither. You traded for Baron Browning as a pass rusher last year. Safeties, you're fine. Corners, I think that's kind of where you're looking. But when Barron and Johnson are both gone, I just don't love what's remaining here. So I'm actually going to go. I might do something wild again.
A lot of different ways. Yeah, and it's good. Go ahead, Brady, if you're ready.
You can go ahead and talk while I'm looking here a little bit.
Okay, yeah. I was just going to say, it's not a bad thing necessarily that you can sit here and consider a lot of different options for the Cardinals. It definitely opens up a lot of doors and a lot of different ways to make this first round selection. Defensive line, like you mentioned, you spent some money. You have a really talented defensive tackle like Walter Nolan still on the board. Desperately need help on that offensive line, specifically interior. But what are you doing if you take Josh Simmons? So it's a tough pick here, as just us trying to do a mock draft and not really knowing where teams have guys on the big board.
Yeah, so and I didn't even mention Darius Robinson, who they took last year in the first round as well. So they've really beefed up that defensive line. I'm going to keep it in the front seven, though, and I'm actually going to go Jahad Campbell here. I know they brought in Akeem Davis-Gaither, and they have Mac Wilson as well. They have Owen Popoe that they drafted last year, who looks like a decent athlete. Don't know how he'll develop in terms of being an actual linebacker. But I kind of like the Kenneth Grant fit as well, but bringing in Dalvin Tomlinson, those are both two big run stoppers, and I don't think that would fit as well. I think Jahad Campbell, he's one of the best pass coverage linebackers I've seen in any draft cycle. He needs to work on a lot of stuff, but he's a super good athlete, and like I said, good in pass coverage. I think he would fit with them pretty well, so I'm happy with that selection.
Yeah, you sniped me because that was going to be my pick here for the Bengals, but it's okay because I'm going to pivot right off of it, and I'm just not going to pass on the talent of Walter Nolan Brady. This is a guy, last mock we did, I was, the evens, and I took him as high as 10 with the Chicago Bears. I think this is a guy who has one of the highest ceilings in this entire draft. Some character concerns, we hear that with a couple guys, but this guy's a mauler, Brady. I the more I watch him, the more I like him. I think I definitely have him ranked higher than Kenneth Grant now. Early in the draft cycle, I definitely had Grant as my DT2 or DT3. But I'm getting pretty high on Nolan. I think the Bengals here, for a team, like you said, every time we were finding out who they were playing and we were taking the opposing team's running back for anytime touchdown, they can get better at specifically that interior defensive line, and it starts right there with Walter Nolan.
Yeah, I like that fit a lot, actually. Here, and, if you keep Hendrickson, that really beefs up your defensive line a lot. You just lost Sam Hubbard this offseason as well. So
yeah, I was going to say I would consider too Shamar Stewart in this spot, Brady, just because you can bounce him on the inside, but he can also play the edge. If they were to get rid of Hendrickson, I would probably opt for him.
Yeah. So I know the biggest need for the Seahawks is offensive line, especially the interior offensive line. But there's a few. I like Zabel. He's not my favorite. Tyler Booker, I think we made that selection a couple times. I think my favorite guy, guard, might actually be Tate Ratledge out of Georgia. I just think this is a little bit early for him, and they might be able to get him later down the line. So I'm going to go you just mentioned him. I'm going to go Kenneth Grant here, actually. So they Mike McDonald, obviously a defensive-minded coach. You have Byron Murphy you drafted last year. But he's a different type of defensive tackle. You've got Leonard Williams, who's they play a 3-4, so he's your defensive end, but he's actually just a bigger bodied defensive tackle that moves out there. You brought in DeMarcus Lawrence. You still got Boye Mafe. You've got a pretty good front seven there, but you lost was it Puna Ford, I think?
Puna Ford,
who was your big nose tackle, your run-stopping nose tackle in this offseason. And that leaves a big gap, and especially for a coach like Mike McDonald, who, coming from the Ravens system 2 years ago, such a great front seven, run defense, pass defense, everything. I think Kenneth Grant fills a big hole for them, and I think he would fit in pretty good in between Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy.
Yeah, and it would keep building on a pretty, first off, young core of defensive players, and it would just be talent all over the field. Witherspoon, Woolen, obviously you mentioned Byron Murphy, my favorite defensive tackle this past year. You add in Grant, it would, that defense flies around the field in general. So I'd love to see Kenneth Grant get paired up there too. That would be a good look. So
yeah, and I just want to say real quick, sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
We both mentioned Byron Murphy being a defensive tackle. He's kind of like Leonard Williams. They play him on the defensive end, out on the perimeter of that 3-4. So that really, I'm not double dipping with the defensive tackles for anybody who might think that. Kenneth Grant will stay in the middle while you have Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy on his outside.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Another one of the easiest picks in this draft, probably right behind the Jalen Walker pick for me. And this is just in my opinion, the pairing of it, I'm going Michael Williams here to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I just think that he completes that defensive line and just front seven pass rush so perfectly. I know he had some production issues at Georgia this past year, but the upside is just it would be hard to pass on, and I would take the gamble here. It's crazy saying gamble over a guy like Mike Green coming from Marshall who puts up better numbers, but the competition levels, things like that. But Michael Williams to the Bucks it's right there with Jalen Walker to the Panthers as far as my favorite picks in the first round.
Yeah, I like that selection a lot. Here with the Broncos, I am going to go. So I don't know if they would take him this high, but I think if we're doing this based off what we would do, you just lost Javonte, and it's kind of funny that I'm taking another North Carolina running back here, Aaron Hampton. But you just lost Javonte, who hasn't necessarily, he didn't look great for them other than that first year prior to the injury. You've got Jaleel McLaughlin right now as your RB1 on the depth chart. You got Audric Estime, who showed a little bit of flashes last year, but he was a third, fourth round pick. Yeah. So you didn't really I think he was, I want to say third. You didn't spend that much of a high pick on him to where you're like in love with him, and you got to let him go out there and be your guy. I think Aaron Hampton offers a little something different than Jaleel, who is our RB1. He's kind of similar to Estime, where he's a bigger back, but he's faster, he's taller. What I actually did, I watched some film on him. The game I watched, he couldn't catch a cold, unfortunately. But I think he's a better receiver than what I saw in just that one game. I need to watch more on him. But the one thing I did notice in terms of the passing offense was he couldn't really catch, but he might not be the greatest blocker in the world, but he will block anybody. He will throw his body on the line to block anybody. So I do like that a lot, and I think that Sean Payton would as well. So I think he fits in pretty good with the Broncos there.
Yeah, as far as like kind of his pass blocking stuff like that, he reminds me a little bit of Bijan. Bijan, a guy stick your nose into a blitzing linebacker or something and pick it up, a willing blocker like you said. So, but even outside of the blocking and catching and things like that, I mean, don't get it twisted. This guy's really talented running the ball, really good vision, hit the hole, really good speed, really good game speed. In my opinion, one cut gone, things like that, and definitely a spot that's going to need upgraded for Sean Payton, and takes a little bit off of Bo Nix as well. So pick 21 here with the Pittsburgh Steelers, Brady. I think you and I agree. We both really like this guy. I'm going to go Josh Simmons, tackle out of Ohio State. Pre-ACL injury, I think this is a guy who would be testing Will Campbell for the best offensive lineman prospect in this draft. I think this would be a really, really good pick with value here for the Steelers, team that has at times struggled to really address that offensive line. And they've been spending draft capital on it. Broderick Jones, and also this last year, Brady, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, they drafted.
I believe it was the Washington. He didn't play a ton.
Fatano or whatever.
Yeah, Fatano.
It is, yeah.
So however they want to make it work, one of those guys probably going to get kicked into guard. In my opinion,
Fatano projects pretty well as a guard.
Yeah, I was going to say he would be a little bit better as a guard, and Josh Simmons, really, really talented tackle. And ultimately, if Aaron Rodgers ends up being the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who knows what that guy's doing right now? Probably ayahuasca and reading books of who knows what. But he had a problem with the Jets offensive line keeping him on his feet. So I just think Josh Simmons is a pretty good pick here.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Simmons, he's not the best pass blocker in this class by any means, but I think I really like the fit here with the Steelers purely because of his run blocking. I mentioned it last time we did this. The Ohio State offensive run game while he was playing compared to when he was out is it's a drastic difference. So I think Arthur Smith would be pounding the table for this guy. I don't know who necessarily their running back is going to be, but I'm sure they'll draft one in this loaded class.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that would be a good fit for them. Here with the Chargers, though, I'm not going to think I'm not gonna think too hard about this one. This is there's no question about this at this point. I'm gonna say it. You wanted me to go Ibuka here. We're letting him fall slightly further. Unfortunately, I know because I don't think Ibuka would actually be here, so I'm just going to go with what I think will be here and who I think they'll take. I think Harbaugh is going to stick with this guy, Colson Loveland. That is tight end one in this class. There is no debate. He's in tier one, and the next closest is in tier three. There's not even a tier two tight end in this class. Colson Loveland is the guy. He played hurt most of this year, and he's still a pretty good blocker. He's a little bit undersized in terms of weight compared to a guy like Tyler Warren, but I don't think that as much of an issue as some others might think. I think he would be a great safety blanket for Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily as high on Loveland as consensus and maybe you, but I will give you credit with this. I'm glad to see a tight end go in the first round before this guy staring me at the face who has 1 year of production and is 28 years old, coming from Penn State, suspect teams where he was getting, I don't know, man. I'm so out on Tyler Warren. I'm not picking him. So unless you find a fit for him in this first round, I'm not picking him. So
just be lucky I don't pick 31 or I'd make your day. I'd ruin your day.
Yeah, it'd be cutting this video immediately. But Loveland, Harbaugh, Herbert, safety blanket, green money bags all over the place. Love it. And it gives me a chance to just do absolutely something awesome. Jordan Love finally gets a true wide receiver one, Brady. No more of the Christian Watson experiment. No more of the Jaden Reed as your number one experiment. Emeka Ibuka, safest player in the draft, going to be a consistent 1,000-yard receiver in the NFL. Absolute... one of my up there with obviously Walker and some of my favorite players in this draft. No brainer in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, every time we do this, I don't want to give him these lofty expectations, but he reminds me of Cooper Kupp. I'm not saying he's going to be a Triple Crown winner by any means, but I like it a lot. I like him a lot, and I think that's who he kind of gives off the vibes of. Like you said, I think he's the safest player in the draft, in my opinion.
Him with Jordan Love would be awesome to watch as well. I mean,
yeah.
So
I'm going to actually, I think you did this last time as well, and I'm the one that originally did it, but I think this is it's a match made in heaven. I think I'm going to go Nick Emenwurier. I don't know exactly how he pronounces his name. I just think he's a Brian Flores wet dream, really. I think he can play a lot of positions. He can play true safety. You could even make him a big clunky corner out there. You can move him down into the nickel. You can play him at linebacker. Heck, I'm sure he could even probably blitz a player too if you needed him to off the edge. I just think with how much Flores likes to move everybody around. I mean, we've seen Josh Metellus, who came into the league as a safety, who he's moved to linebacker at this position, who was awesome last year for them. I think a guy like Emenwurier would fit in perfectly with Brian Flores, and I like the fit a lot there with him.
Yeah, I actually do like that, Brady. And it's coming up here, pick 25. Last time we did this, somebody in the comment section flamed you for taking an offensive back, I believe that it was called. Luther Burden in this spot, so I'm not going to take an offensive back.
Don't listen to the haters. Do what you know is right.
I kind of want to switch it up and do something weird here. They're obviously mocked to offensive line all the time with Tunsil getting replaced, but they brought in and traded for Cam Robinson from Minnesota, Ed Ingram from Minnesota, Laken Tomlinson from Seattle. They also have Titus Howard, Jared Patterson, Juice Scruggs. So I'm not saying by any means it's a great offensive line, but where are those guys in rankings with Gray Zabel, Tyler Booker right now? If Josh Simmons isn't there, I think this is too high for Connerly. I would pass on him. So I'm gonna get kind of different here. I'm gonna go Shamar Stewart, Brady. I think him with Will Anderson and Daniel Hunter, with that defensive scheme. I mean, we saw they were giving the Chiefs a lot of problems in that playoff game. Your defensive line just gets better, and I just don't think that you force a pick here of Connerly or Zabel when a talent like Shamar Stewart is on the board, or even like Mike Green if they like him more.
Yeah, and you said it earlier with Shamar. He's got that inside outside flexibility as
Mm-hmm.
well. Because Daniel Hunter and Will Anderson are almost more just true edges. Ideally, they're both a little bit smaller, but Shamar is a massive human, so he can kind of do both. That's another offensive or defensive minded head coach who I'm sure would love the idea of having an extra guy that he can toss in there at any given moment who can kind of just be a big game wrecker. We've mentioned it before. Shamar and Michael, even they're not the greatest. They haven't shown the production yet necessarily in terms of pass rush, um, with a sack production or anything. But they're both very good run stoppers, which I think would help the Texans a
Run
lot.
stoppers, and I mean, you're not getting the sacks, but like you're both of those guys, Michael and Shamar Stewart, produce pretty good pressure rate numbers. And I mean,
Yeah,
say what you want about that made up stat, or it doesn't necessarily contribute to production, but like pressure rate's pretty important. I mean, just because you're not necessarily getting the sack doesn't mean that it's not affecting the play. I mean, ask Patrick Mahomes when he had Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter in his face 2 seconds after the ball was snapped.
yeah. I like that fit a lot. And you said it earlier. I don't love doing it. I'm not a big fan of them. I said there's not even a tight end and tight end two or tier two. But I think McVay could find some pretty interesting things to do with a guy like Tyler Warren. Um, I he only did have the 1 year production. I think the 1 year production fools some people. I think he was a better tight end in those prior years. He just didn't he They just didn't really throw him the ball, and then they finally realized like, hey, this guy's actually not bad. Let's give him the ball. And then they overdid it to the point where some people are putting him in the top 10 to be drafted. I don't think he's that good, but I think I can understand the late first. I'd say he's more of like a early second guy, mid second, in my opinion. But I don't hate the fit here. Like I said, I think a guy like McVay could do a lot of interesting things with a guy like Warren. And Warren is a good blocker. He's not as good of a blocker as some people might think, but he is a high effort guy, which a guy like McVay would like because he likes
Mm-hmm.
his tight ends and wide receivers to almost kind of play fullback a lot of the times. And I think a guy like Warren, who actually could project as a pretty good fullback if all things go wrong at tight end, would be pretty good for a guy like McVay.
I just get such Eric Ebron vibes with Tyler Warren, man. I don't know. I mean, Ebron went 10, and that's probably, in reality, that's probably around the range of where Warren is going to go, somewhere between, 10 to 15. Like, I saw the Bears, some leaks and stuff, they like him. And it's like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm missing something. I don't know if it's just I'm a hater on him. I don't know. And Brady, like we've said before, usually when you and I both hate a player and don't think they're any good, they end up being Hall of Fame or pro talent. So this probably means Tyler Warren is the next Travis Kelsey. So take that for what it's worth, Rams fans.
Yeah, probably.
So pick 27, no brainer, similar to the Michael Williams, Jalen Walker. This is Mike Green every single day of the week for me. This is pretty good. Pick 27, late first round. This is about where I would have him. I could see him going as high as like 15 to the Falcons if they wanted to pull the trigger on edge, but I think Mike Green would actually prefer and love this fit with the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, I like that fit a lot. I passed on him last time in that same exact pick, and I regretted it right after. Honestly,
Yeah.
I think the production with Mike Green is just it's too good to really pass up at a point like this. Um, he's a little bit undersized in term compared to some of these other edges. He's not necessarily like that undersized for an actual true defensive end, but I think he would fit in pretty good with the Ravens here. Here for the Lions, I think there are only two places they can go, and it just depends on which side you want to go with. They're going to go to the trenches here. It just depends if you think they want to fill that guard need or if you think they're going to fill that edge need with the future of Aiden Hutchinson a little bit shaky at this point due to the injury, and they were trying to find somebody to go across from him regardless. Um, from everything I've heard about Pierce, I'm not sure he might even go early second at this point. I think he might just be the biggest locker room cancer that we've ever heard of potentially. The production hasn't really fallen off compared to what it was a year prior. But I just think that if these two, if Ezaraku and Pierce were the two left here, I think that they would opt for a guy like Ezaraku over Pierce. So that's how I'm going to go here. He can be your, he's a little bit undersized as well, like Mike Green, but he can be your edge opposite of a Hutchinson. And even if Hutchinson uh, is out for a while, if he's your edge, it's him and Josh Pascal, and you brought in Marcus Davenport. You've got an okay edge rotation. You know, that's probably bottom half of the league,
Mm-hmm.
but it won't completely sink your ship, I don't think. So I'm all right with that selection there.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all, Brady. Yeah, I think it's Ezra Rocker or James Pierce, and kind of the things that we're hearing about James Pierce. I'm not sure that he'll even get in to the first round here, the second mock draft that we do together. It's just we'll kind of see what happens with him. So coming in here, the Washington Commanders. Obviously, you go out and get Larmy Tunsil, trade a pretty good package to get him. And with Amari and Hampton gone, last time we did this, you took Travion Henderson. I believe it was. I'm not.
Yeah, I
Gonna
forgot
go,
we were doing what we would do.
Yeah, I'm not
I
going to
would make
go.
that selection.
I'm not going to go the running back route here. I'm looking at Luther Burden because I think when you're giving up some of those mid round draft picks, I think you can kind of use this first round pick, especially with the value that's on the board, to kind of take a swing on a guy like Luther Burden. So that is what I'm going to do here at pick 29. It gives you a pretty good receiver room of Deebo Samuel, who you bring in, Terry McLaurin, obviously, who finally looked like the receiver that we all knew him to be with a competent quarterback. And then you add in a pretty good talent in Luther Burden, and it's just the thing with Burden here, Brady. And I'm not sure if you kind of saw this comp. I can't remember who said it, but it's like you're either getting a Deebo Samuel-esque type of receiver, or you're getting Jalen Rager. It's that, to me, out of all the wide receivers that are going to be going in the top 50 picks of this draft, he's one that scares me a lot. But if he works out, then how many more years does Deebo really have of like good production? You could look at Burden maybe spending this first year as that wide receiver 3 and then making the jump to your wide receiver 2 the following year, depending on what Deebo Samuel's production looks like.
Yeah, I mean, the comp I've had for Luther Burden the entire way is I comp him to Khalil Shakir, which is nothing like either of those two that you really mentioned. Uh, but Debo's always a hard one to comp, I think, just because of the play style that the Niners had him play. I'm not
Yeah.
like you can't really almost classify him fully as a wide receiver, but I can kind of see that comp. But yeah, like you said, he can kind of fill that role post Debo once he, if he only has 1, 2 more years left or whatever it may be, he can kind of learn from Debo even there with the Commanders. Here with the Bills, though, I think I went him last time in the first round. And I'm going to stick with him because I am a fan. Azariah Thomas from
Mm-hmm.
Florida State, the corner. So the last time they took a corner in the first round was my guy Kyrie Elam from Florida, who unfortunately just didn't work out. They traded him this offseason. You still have Benford there as a corner that I'm actually pretty high on. I actually really like. You've got Dane Jackson as your other corner, who I'm not very high on and don't really like. You got Teron Johnson as your nickel corner, who I'm not sure if he did get all pro honors this offseason, but he was worthy of them if he didn't. He was pretty good in the nickel for them, and I am a big fan of him. I think Thomas projects as a pretty good outside corner. That would kind of solidify your secondary in terms of corners, at least. They need help at safety as well, but I just opted for corner here. I think Thomas fits in with them pretty good and would fill that need that they needed since they drafted Elam.
Yeah, absolutely. Azariah Thomas, one of the more talented cornerbacks in this. Once that kind of tier break drops of Johnson from Michigan, Barron, and then I actually believe Brady. Yeah, this is the next cornerback. Since pick 15 with Jahdae Barron to the Falcons. So I think we'll see three. We'll see 3 sneak into the first round here, and Azariah Thomas, a name that might catch some attention of like, whoa, what is this pick? But really good player, obviously in the shadow realm of what was a unbelievable Florida State season. But yeah, a really good talent. So coming in here, pick 31, Kansas City Chiefs. Left me was actually some pretty decent options. I would consider James Pierce here to replace. I don't say replace, but he's just like how much better is he than Mike Dana and really like FAU, who they drafted from Kansas State, who has done and developed into nothing but a rotational edge piece for us for the Chiefs. I'm going to pass on James Pierce. I'm not going guard or tackle. I'm not going Zabel. Scorton kind of stands out to me, Brady. If I was going to go edge, I'd go Scorton. But to me, man, this is Derek Harmon. It's a team that needs another defensive tackle. Derek Noddy not there anymore. You ultimately have to find somebody to take over the Chris Jones role whenever he calls it quits. And they run the 4-3 already, so he's going to be getting a ton of snaps his rookie year. And Derek Harmon's pretty talented defensive tackle in general, so I actually like the pairing there. If I'm going defensive line, I would prefer the interior over edge. I think you just kind of ride it out with. Or Karlaftis is going to do his thing regardless. He's good. Don't get me wrong, but you just kind of piece it together with Dana and Felix. FAU. So
yeah, I like the Harmon fit there a lot. Like you said, they just lost Nandi and they lost Wharton as well to the Panthers. So here with the Eagles, I'm going to go. I'm going to stick with what they did last offseason. I think the Eagles are usually a lock to go front seven, whether that's defense or offense. But I think that's kind of they usually go depth later in the draft, and there's just not a guy here that I quite like enough to really go in the first that's remaining. But at corner you've got Quinyon Mitchell, they have a little bit of a gap because your next corner on the outside is Adoree Jackson or Keely Ringo. Keely Ringo a couple years ago was rated pretty highly, but ended up dropping to the fourth round. Hasn't really done anything yet. And then Cooper DeJean in the nickel, who was awesome last year as a rookie. But your safeties, you still have Reed Blankenship, who, I actually think is pretty sneaky good. But then your other one is Tristan McCollum. You've got Louis Cine backing him up, a former first rounder for the Vikings who just hasn't panned out, unfortunately. And then you've got Sidney Brown as well, who is fast, brother of Chase Brown, Bengals running back. But I just don't think either of them project super great as like true safeties. So I think me personally, I'm high on him, as you know. I'm going to go Andrew Makuba here to fill that other safety need and play up top for them. I'm a big fan of Makuba, and we had how many Texas players did we have drafted here in this first round? 1, 2, 3, 4.
yeah,
4 first round Texas players drafted, and I think from what I've realized here this offseason, just looking back and everything, if the Texas Longhorns had a competent QB, they might have cakewalked to a natty this offseason because Quinn Ewers might have just been that bad because they have a lot of really good football players, and I like the fit with Makuba here a lot.
Yeah, it kind of opens your eyes up to it, and yeah, Brady, a guy you're very high on. It kind of be interesting to see how it plays out. I would be excited. I'm excited to see him play because it's a guy you're pretty high on. Before I plug him in and all of our stuff goes away here, let's kind of take a look at the guys that missed the cut here in our first round, Brady. James, and we just kind of give a quick overview of why we're kind of out on them or why they didn't make the cut. So James Pierce, as you and I both mentioned, locker room concerns, cancer in the locker room, things like that. For a guy who I believe it was like 8 sacks this past year, 8 sacks in the SEC, pretty good pressure rates. Actually, an undersized edge rusher at 6'5", 243. Does those win rates translate over to the NFL level? Who knows? I don't know if you're taking the risk on that in the first round. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I said, Pierce's production didn't necessarily drop off all that much from the year prior, where he was projected to be the number 1 overall selection for this draft. He kept up that production. Ideally, you'd like to see that number even a little bit higher, but it wasn't bad production by any means. And Tennessee wasn't all that bad even, but there's a lot coming out about him potentially being this big locker room cancer, and it seems that might just be a common thing with the Tennessee football team, unfortunately. And I think guys like that they lose some value in terms to some GMs and stuff like that. But I think at some point somebody's going to pull the trigger on a guy like James Pierce. I just think he's super talented, and I think he does. He's definitely a first round talent. That's not a debate, I don't think. But I just think that the locker room issues are just going to hold him back from that, unfortunately.
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, it's a extremely deep edge class in general, so it'll be something to watch on draft night if it's Ezra, if James Pierce goes to the Lions, is it Ezra who we're talking about that's out of the first round? Or, I think really the only edges like lock to go are Mike Green, Stewart, Mike Hill for sure, Jalen Walker if you classify him as an edge, and then Abdul Carter, of course. But outside of James Pierce, Gray Zabel, North Dakota State, all 5 positions can be played by him. Just didn't necessarily find a fit for him here. I think he could be in play for Commanders or Texans, somebody like that seeking offensive
He could go
line
even
help.
as high as 18 to the Seahawks.
Yeah, I saw that a lot recently too. Nick Scorton, a guy who's borderline linked to the Eagles a ton, could see him maybe at the end of the first round. Considered him there for the Chiefs actually. Josh Connerly, probably the next tackle guard outside of Josh Simmons. Obviously, wonder if the lack of tackle talent forces him up the board into the first round. That'll be something to keep your eye on. And then outside of that, Brady, I think, in terms of like consensus, Tyler Booker's a guy that we've gotten to the first round a couple times. He kind of misses the cut here, but would be a top 8 pick in the second round.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, and a guard, strictly a guard too. So somebody, maybe you're not pulling the trigger on in the first round. Anybody else, Brady, you kind of want to talk about as first round talent that didn't make it? Travion Henderson, maybe?
So I do need to rephrase that from last time. I took Travion Henderson in the first round. I kind of forgot that we were doing that based off what we would do in that scenario.
Yeah.
I'm not high on Travion Henderson to the point where I think he belongs in the first round or anything like that. I think NFL teams will be, but he's not my cup of tea necessarily. But I could very easily see him going early second or, here in the late first. Just purely, like I said last time, off his pass blocking ability. Or I think my mic actually cut out by that point. Hopefully it doesn't do it again. But yeah, I think he would turn some heads for some GMs here. One guy I do want to mention actually, who we haven't mentioned prior to this, and had I had the odd picks this time, I would have done something crazy. I want to talk about Jalen Milroe a little bit. We haven't mentioned him at all. The more I've watched on him and Shadur, I think Shadur's floor is definitely safer. But I'm an Anthony Richardson guy, a little Florida connection, all that. But just in general, I'm high on those athletic guys that could potentially put it all together, and that seems to what has been working these past couple of years. When you look at guys like Lamar, Josh Allen, even a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who came in as kind of a project and is now best quarterback in the league, and some might even argue the best of all time. But I'm not saying Jalen Milroe would be that or anything, but I think with Shadur's floor being safer, I can see him being the pick here in the first round. But I think a team like the Steelers here at 21, which is what I would have probably done, I think a team like them, especially with the future uncertain, if you're even getting Rodgers at this point, that he could fit in there potentially. And whether you throw him right into the fire or you let him sit for a year or two, he's still young. I think I'm not positive his exact age. Let me look it up real fast.
I think, one thing to consider with Milroe is not only did he accept the first round invitation to come to the room on draft night, stuff like that, people need to realize, we saw this with Leggett and Ricky Pearsall getting picked there in the first round. Skill players on the offensive side of the ball. Even if, let's say Milroe gets past 21, the Steelers, you could see a team like the Browns or a QB needy team trade into the late first round and take Milroe for the 5th year option. And It's just, I like Milroe, and I guess looking back on it now, I should have considered him with that pick with the Steelers, because I don't know why I'm still under the impression that Rodgers is going to sign. Who knows what he's going to do? But yeah, I think the Jackson Dart, I'm not I'm not
I'm
in on
I'm
him.
fully out on Jackson. He's not even in my top five actually. But what I wanted to touch on a little bit is I actually do. I have Milrose QB2 personally now at this
Mm.
point. I think Shadur is QB3 now. I don't think either of them are actually worthy of being a first round pick. I think it's more just the QB tax, unfortunately. Just like I don't feel as though Cam Ward belongs at the 101. But they need a QB at this point, and I understand that he is the best QB in this class, so I wouldn't be upset with it. But unfortunately, I was going to say earlier, I think Cam Ward kind of fits in more of the tier of a Baker Mayfield type first overall pick QB rather than a guy like a uh, him, like a Trevor Lawrence who
Yeah.
hasn't necessarily panned out quite like they had thought, but was build this generational guy. Caleb Williams even last year, and if Cam Ward would have came out last year with the film he had this season, I still think he goes. I think he'd be QB5. I would take him over Michael Penix and JJ McCarthy, but I think you take Nix, knowing what we know now.
Hmm.
But even then, last year I might have still taken Nix over him. You got May, Williams, and Jaden Daniels, who are
Daniels,
all
yeah.
better. I just don't think that. I think Ward lucked out with this draft class, but I don't hate the pick for the Titans completely.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Um, yeah, man, it'd be interesting to see what happens there with Milrow. I actually would like to see him sneak into the first round. People thought the Ravens were crazy when they took Lamar there at the end of the first round, and that panned out pretty good for them. And kind of the last thing I'll say about Milrow, and we'll kind of wrap things up here, is you kind of have to realize this past season, new system with DeBoer, a lot of young receivers. I mean, his wide receiver one was 17, Ryan Williams.
Yeah.
A lot of moving parts there for a guy his last year at quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see if an NFL team pulls the trigger on him in the first round, whether that's stick and pick where they're at or trade back in. I could see the Cleveland Browns doing it, Brady. If that's a guy they like, they wouldn't have to move up too far with that high second round pick they have. So
Well, they've got I think they might actually have 33. They might have the first pick of the second round. I'm pretty sure.
I think they may. So as always, guys, appreciate you guys watching, and probably have one more mock draft before the real deal happens, and then it'll kind of just be reactions and fits based off that. So, Brady, as always, brother, appreciate you tuning in, and like, comment, subscribe, everybody, and be back at it. So.